When a hitman is on the job, his scope is suddenly blocked by a beautiful woman. He quickly refocuses on his target, but man's instincts make him sneak another peek. Realizing this won't work, he stabilizes his mind and checks his watch. Heart rate 65, the perfect state. Karl grips his rifle, focusing intensely, ready to take the perfect shot. As the wealthy man reappears in his sights, Karl pulls the trigger decisively. But at the critical moment, the beautiful woman moves, catching the bullet instead. Karl swiftly reloads, ready for another shot, but the bodyguard has already noticed his position and quickly pulls the curtain shut. Karl calmly packs up his rifle, picks up any litter, dons his helmet, and rushes downstairs, hopping onto a scooter parked outside. As police cars roar by, Karl navigates the back roads, discarding the magazine and equipment along the way. He casually tosses his helmet into a river, ensuring all evidence is gone. He then stops at a convenience store, using the bathroom break to change clothes and clean himself up. As a detail-oriented professional, he even shaves carefully and douses himself with cologne before leaving. All set, he hails a cab and heads straight to the airport. Before entering, he wipes his fingerprints off his gun and discreetly disposes of it in a trash can. However, at security, he spots a police dog staring at him. Despite his thorough cleaning, he knows not to gamble against a dog's nose. So he abandons this flight, heads to the bathroom, and meticulously cleans himself again, including the sink he used. In Karl's world, details are life and death. He books another flight, and just before boarding receives a call from his boss.
How could this happen? It's unprecedented.
It happened.
This is a problem. Obviously, it's a fucking problem, to say the least.
Karl knows that failing a high-profile hit often leads to the hitman being silenced. Now, he's likely being hunted from both sides. He hangs up, removes his SIM card, and smashes his phone to avoid being tracked. Even on the plane, Karl remains vigilant, noticing a man in sunglasses who seems to be watching him. Once landed, Karl uses a fake identity to book a connecting flight. Coincidentally, the sunglasses guy is on the same flight, confirming his suspicions. Karl changes his flight to the next morning and checks into the airport hotel, ordering dinner for the tools and weapons it provides. He sets a glass against the door handle and a plate by the door so the glass would fall and alert him if anyone tried to enter. Armed with a dinner knife, he sits in the dark watching. The night passes without incident, and the sunglasses guy doesn't reappear. Karl finally boards his flight back to the Dominican Republic, where his car awaits. But on the drive, he remains cautious, constantly changing routes and avoiding parallel driving with any car. After a day of detours, Karl reaches home but spots two large footprints at the door, definitely not his wife's size. Cigarette butts nearby suggest someone had been watching his house. This isn't a burglary, it's an assassination attempt. Realizing the danger, Karl retrieves his gun from the car and stealthily enters the house through the bushes. Footprints near the house indicate someone has been inside. He crouches and moves quickly, rock music blaring inside, but his wife is nowhere to be seen. Rushing to the bedroom, he finds it trashed with bloodstains on the walls. He calls his wife only to learn she's critically injured in the hospital.
There were two of them. Been very kind to my sister. She loves you. I've learned not to pry. This wasn't a robbery.
His brother-in-law explains that a man and a woman broke in and attacked her. With no time to lose, Karl transfers his wife to a private hospital and heads home to dig up his emergency gear, hidden from his wife. Armed and disguised as a tourist, Karl starts hunting for a green taxi, leading him to the company that owns it. At night, he approaches the company, pretending to have an urgent inquiry. As the manager opens the door, Karl shoots him and searches the office records, discovering a car that was near his house 2 days ago. With all the information needed, Karl creates a robbery scene to cover his true intentions and leaves. The next morning, he tracks the curly-haired driver of the green taxi, posing as a passenger. Pointing a gun, he questions the driver about the clients who visited his house. The curly-haired driver recalls, "It was a man and a woman. The man was beefy, and the woman looked like a Q-tip." They arrived in a private jet, rented the taxi, and drove to a secluded private residence deep in the woods. An hour later, they headed back to the airport. The driver didn't ask any questions, so he didn't know what they did inside. Karl knows that the more the driver reveals, the faster he'll die. He doesn't know who these two are, but his boss definitely does. Because in this business, only the boss knows his home address. Karl boards a flight to New Orleans with a fake ID. He has 6 warehouses here, all stocked with military-grade equipment. He takes a handgun, 2 bullets, a new passport, and picks a license plate from his stash for his car. The boss lives in a high-security apartment building that requires facial recognition to open the main door. Karl disguises himself as a cleaner, waiting outside for an opportunity. Soon enough, a delivery guy opens the door. Karl hurries, dragging a trash bin behind him, and follows. The delivery guy exits the elevator on the 4th floor. Karl follows. The boss lives on the 4th floor too, and it's a single unit. As the delivery guy opens the door with a magnetic strip, Karl starts counting. At 7 seconds, the door closes. He needs to get in within 7 seconds. Seeing the door open, Karl peeks in and spots the boss's secretary. Just as the delivery guy leaves, Karl moves to the water fountain, pretending to drink. The delivery guy leaves without noticing him. Karl counts again and slips in just before the door closes. Leaving the trash bin outside, Karl enters with his gun and toolbox. The secretary is terrified, but Karl's target isn't him. It's Mr. Gray. Karl forces the secretary to tie Mr. Gray to a chair and then bind himself in the bathroom. Karl leaves the door slightly ajar to keep an eye on the secretary. Mr. Gray, a lawyer on the surface, is a hitman broker. The attack on Karl's wife was a warning after he failed to kill a wealthy target. Someone ordered the hit through Mr. Gray to teach Karl a lesson. Karl demands to know the client's identity, but Mr. Gray, honoring his professional code, refuses. Karl takes out an airgun and nails Mr. Gray's laptop and phone. Panicking, Mr. Gray reveals the client's information is on the computer, but it's now destroyed. Karl doesn't buy it and nails Mr. Gray in the chest. If the nails aren't removed within 6 minutes, he'll suffocate. Mr. Gray stubbornly insists he won't betray his client, even if it means dying. 3 minutes in, Mr. Gray collapses in pain. Karl calmly places a newspaper under him to catch the blood. But Mr. Gray, secretly smoking, dies of a heart attack before the 6 minutes are up. Karl, unfazed, stuffs the body into the trash bin and cleans up the scene.
I know who they were. I'll give you those names. But promise me you won't leave things looking the wrong way.
Releasing the secretary, Karl pushes the bin and him into the elevator. 2 more people enter, but the terrified secretary knows better than to ask for help, fearing Karl's ruthlessness. The secretary leads Karl to his home, where they find the hit order with 2 phone numbers on the back. The account holder behind the hit is Beefy Guy and Q-Tip Girl. Another order has Edward's information, the one who placed the hit. Karl has all he needs. As they descend the stairs, Karl swiftly snaps the secretary's neck, making it look like an accidental fall. He dissolves Mr. Gray's body in vinegar barrels at his warehouse, thoroughly cleans his car, changes plates, and sets off to find Beefy Guy. Karl thrives as the hunter, not the hunted. Arriving at the destination, Karl rents a car with a fake ID and stakes out Beefy Guy's house. Seeing a large dog, he buys drugged steaks and beer. At night, Karl approaches the house, calming the barking dog with the drugged steak. As soon as Karl stepped into the room, Beefy Guy launched a surprise attack, catching Karl off guard and delivering a brutal beating. Beefy Guy's muscles were bulging. It was clear he was a professional. Knowing he couldn't win in a straight fight, Karl grabbed an iron hook from beside the bed and drove it into Beefy Guy's massive muscles. But Beefy Guy was tough. He endured the pain and reached for his gun. Unable to withstand the gunfire, Karl quickly retreated to the previous room, finding a gun under the bed. Just as Beefy Guy reached the doorway, Karl shot him dead. However, the gunshot woke the sleeping dog, who, realizing it had failed in its duty, rushed into the room with a whimper. Seeing its dead master, the dog charged at Karl, but he nimbly leapt outside, lit a torch, and threw it into the house. Even though the dog was a witness, Karl was confident it wouldn't say a word. Karl cleaned himself up in an airport bathroom and prepared to eliminate Q-Tip Girl. After identifying his target, he trailed her to a restaurant where she was on a date and boldly walked in. When a woman is murdered, her husband or boyfriend is usually the prime suspect, so Karl felt safe. While Q-Tip Girl's boyfriend went to the restroom, Karl took his seat and quickly revealed his gun. Q-Tip Girl froze, knowing her fate was sealed. She requested to finish her last meal, a mercy Karl granted. She then asked for a final romantic walk, but Karl shot her suddenly. He was a straightforward hitman, lacking any sentimental feelings. Swift execution was his style. After taking down 2 colleagues, Karl reflected on the irony of killers being killed. But his task wasn't over. Beefy guy and Q-tip girl were just the hitmen. Edward, the mastermind behind the contract, was the real target. Edward, a wealthy Chicagoan, traveled in an armored car and lived in a high-end apartment, making direct access difficult. Karl waited until the driver left the garage door slightly open and slipped inside, attempting to access the apartment via the garage stairs. However, the internal door was locked. Karl photographed the lock and ordered a matching electronic key. The next day, armed with the duplicated key, Karl followed Edward to a gym. As he passed a janitor, he suddenly snatched the janitor's keys, using them to access Edward's locker and copy his apartment keycard. Karl then left the gym, entered the garage, used the purchase key to open the small door inside, and successfully gained entry to the apartment. Using the copied keycard, he opened Edward's door. Seeing Karl suddenly enter, Edward thought he was being robbed and immediately surrendered. Karl pulled out the contract and Edward realized he was facing the hitman he had hired. After Karl's failed attempt, Old Gray had extorted more money from Edward, promising to clean up the mess and ensuring it wouldn't trace back to Edward. Edward paid again, unaware of Old Gray's true intentions. Karl now understood why Old Gray had never revealed Edward's identity. Old Gray wanted to warn Karl, not Edward. Revealing Edward's name would have made Old Gray's situation even worse. With the full picture now clear, Karl spared Edward, knowing he wouldn't be foolish enough to provoke a hitman who could freely enter his home. Through this ordeal, Karl grasped the fate of a hitman. The cycle of killing and being killed is ever present. He decided to retire and seek a peaceful life with his wife. However, once a hitman, vigilance is forever. Even behind sunglasses, Karl's eyes never closed. He was always observing, always alert. Life's journey might be long, but the only path that accurately reflects the future is the one you've walked yourself. Karl's numerous kills had created countless enemies, and no matter how well he covered his tracks, danger was always near. You reap what you sow, your fate is in your own hands.